Her leg was gone. Her dreams shattered, but then a stranger changed everything. The fall rain hammered against the hospital windows like bullets, each drop exploding into countless fragments that mirrored how Zara Nightingale felt inside. She stared at the white ceiling tiles, counting them for the 100th time since the accident 3 weeks ago. 47 tiles. 47 pieces of a puzzle that would never make her whole again. The skiing accident had happened so fast. One moment she was flying down the slopes, preparing for the Olympic trials that would have changed her life forever. The next, she was tumbling through the air. Her right leg twisted at an impossible angle after hitting a hidden rock. The doctors had tried everything, but the damage was too severe. Amputation was the only option to save her life. Miss Nightingale? A gentle voice interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see a man in scrubs standing in the doorway. But he wasn't wearing the typical white coat of the doctors who usually visited. This one was different, tall, with kind brown eyes and hands that looked like they'd seen their share of hard work. "I'm Kai Montenegro, your new physical therapist," he said, stepping into the room with a confidence that somehow didn't feel overwhelming. "I know you've been through hell, but I'm here to help you figure out what comes next." Zara's laugh was bitter. "What comes next? I was supposed to compete in the Olympics in 6 months. I've trained my entire life for that moment. Now I can't even get out of bed without help." Her voice cracked despite her efforts to sound strong. Kai pulled up a chair beside her bed, his movements deliberate and calm. "I've worked with a lot of athletes who thought their world was ending. Some of them were right. Their old world did end. But sometimes when one door closes, another one opens that you never knew existed. Don't give me that inspirational poster nonsense," Zara snapped, though there was more pain than anger in her voice. "You have no idea what this feels like." For a moment, Kai was quiet. Then he rolled up his left pant leg, revealing a prosthetic limb that gleamed dully in the hospital lighting. "You're right. I don't know exactly what you're feeling. Everyone's journey is different. But I do know what it's like to wake up one day and realize the person you were is gone forever." Zara's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected this. "What happened to you?" "IED in Afghanistan. I was a Marine, planned to make it my career. One day I'm running patrol. The next I'm waking up in a medical tent missing my leg and watching my dreams disappear along with it." His voice was steady, matter of fact, but she could hear the echoes of old pain underneath. How do you move forward from something like that?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "One day at a time, one choice at a time. And sometimes, with help from people who believe in you even when you can't believe in yourself." He stood up, adjusting his prosthetic with practiced ease. "I'm not going to lie to you, Zara. This is going to be the hardest thing you've ever done, harder than any training you've endured. But I've seen people come back from this stronger than they ever imagined possible." She studied his face, looking for pity or false hope, but found neither. Instead, she saw something she hadn't encountered in weeks. Genuine understanding mixed with quiet determination. "Why do you do this?" she asked. "Help people like me, I mean." A small smile crossed his features. "Because someone did it for me once. And because I've learned that sometimes the most beautiful transformations come from the most broken places." He headed toward the door, then paused. "Think about it, Zara. When you're ready to start building something new from the pieces of what was lost, I'll be here." After he left, Zara continued staring at the ceiling tiles. But for the first time since the accident, she found herself thinking about something other than what she'd lost. 47 tiles. And maybe, just maybe, 47 possibilities she hadn't considered yet. First steps to a weeks later, Zara found herself in the rehabilitation gym, gripping parallel bars so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cool temperature, and her remaining leg trembled with the effort of supporting her weight. Every muscle in her body screamed in protest, but she refused to give up. "Breathe." Kai's voice was steady beside her. "You're holding your breath, and that's making everything harder." "Easy for you to say," she gasped. But she tried to follow his instruction anyway. The prosthetic felt alien attached to her body, heavy and unresponsive. It was nothing like the specialized racing prosthetics she'd seen Paralympic athletes use. This was basic, functional, designed for walking rather than flying down mountains. Feel that? Kai's hand rested lightly on her shoulder. You just took 3 steps. 3 more than you could take yesterday. Zara paused, realizing he was right. Yesterday, she'd barely managed to stand without falling. Today, she'd actually moved forward, however awkwardly. It doesn't feel like progress. It feels like I'm learning to walk like a toddler. In a way, you are. You're rebuilding everything from the ground up. Kai moved to stand in front of her, walking backward as she continued her slow journey between the bars. Tell me about your first time on skis. I was 4, she said, surprised by the question. The memory brought an unexpected smile to her face. My dad took me to this tiny hill behind our house. I fell down probably 50 times that first day, but I kept getting back up because skiing felt like flying. And now I'll never fly again. The words came out more bitter than she intended. Kai stopped walking, causing her to pause as well. Zara, can I tell you something? The first time I saw a Paralympic skier in action, I cried. Not because I felt sorry for him, but because watching him race was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. He wasn't trying to be like an able-bodied skier. He was something entirely new, something maybe even more incredible. You think I could? She couldn't finish the sentence, afraid to voice the hope that had been quietly growing in her chest. I think you could do anything you set your mind to. The question is, what do you want? Before she could answer, another voice interrupted them. Excuse me, are you Zara Nightingale? They turned to see a woman in her 30s approaching, moving with the fluid grace of an athlete. What caught Zara's attention immediately was the woman's prosthetic leg, sleek, modern, and clearly designed for performance. I'm Chloe Rivers, the woman said, extending her hand. I compete in Paralympic alpine skiing. Kai thought you might like to meet someone who's been where you are. Zara shook her hand, still staring at the prosthetic. You ski? I mean, competitively. Chloe laughed. I've won 3 gold medals, actually. Lost my leg in a car accident when I was 22. Thought my life was over. She gestured to the racing blade attached to her leg. Turns out, it was just beginning differently than I'd planned. How long did it take to get good again? I mean, that's the wrong question, Chloe said gently. I never got good again. I had to become good at something completely new. It took about 2 years before I felt confident on adaptive skis, and another year before I was competitive. But those were the most transformative years of my life. Zara felt something stirring in her chest, not quite hope yet, but maybe the beginning of it. Could you show me? Sometime? How about we start with getting you walking first? Kai interjected with a grin, though I have to say, your balance is already better than most people I work with. Years of ski training, Zara said. Automatically, then paused. I guess some things don't just disappear. No, they don't. Chloe agreed. They become the foundation for something new. The strength you built, the discipline, the determination, all of that is still there. You just need to learn how to use it differently. As they talked, Zara found herself taking more steps between the parallel bars, her movements becoming slightly more fluid. The prosthetic still felt foreign, but for the first time, she could imagine it becoming part of her rather than just an attachment. Kai, she said suddenly, stopping mid-stride. When can we start talking about sports, prosthetics? His smile was answer enough. How about we master walking first, then worry about flying? But as Zara looked between Kai's encouraging face and Chloe's knowing smile, she realized that for the first time since the accident, she was thinking about the future instead of mourning the past. And that future, uncertain as it was, suddenly seemed to hold possibilities she'd never imagined. Breaking through 3 months into her rehabilitation, Zara had developed a routine that would have killed her former self. Up at 5 a.m. for strength training, breakfast with Kai, who had become not just her therapist, but her closest friend. Then, hours of balance work, gait training, and what he called functional movement, learning to navigate stairs, uneven surfaces, and the 1,000 small challenges of daily life with a prosthetic. Today was different. Today, Kai had driven her to a small ski slope 2 hours outside the city, where Chloe was waiting with adaptive equipment and infinite patience. I'm terrified, Zara admitted, staring at the snowy hill that looked impossibly steep despite being labeled a beginner slope. The adaptive skis were shorter than what she was used to, without riggers for balance, and the whole setup felt alien. Good, Chloe said, adjusting the bindings. Fear means you're paying attention. The day you stop being a little scared is the day you get careless. Kai stood beside them, watching carefully as Chloe explained the equipment. He'd been supportive of this next step, but Zara could see the worry in his eyes. Over the months, their relationship had shifted from strictly professional to something deeper, something neither of them had quite acknowledged yet. You don't have to do this today, he said quietly. We can take as much time as you need. I need to know, Zara replied, fitting her helmet. I need to know if I can still feel that sense of flying, or if that part of me died with my leg. The first run was humbling. What had once been instinctive now required conscious thought for every movement. She fell twice, frustration building with each tumble into the snow. But as she got back up the second time, she felt something familiar. The stubborn determination that had carried her through years of training. Again, she said, brushing snow off her jacket. The third run was better, the fourth better still. By the sixth run, something magical happened. For just a moment, as she carved a clean turn across the slope, she felt it again, that sense of weightlessness, of dancing with gravity instead of fighting it. It wasn't the same as before, but it was something new, something that belonged entirely to who she was becoming. At the bottom of the hill, she found Kai waiting with expression she'd never seen before, pride mixed with something deeper, more personal. How was it? He asked. Different, she said, then smiled. But good different, really good different. You looked beautiful out there, he said, then seemed surprised by his own words. I mean, your form was. Kai, she reached for his hand, interrupting his awkward backtracking. Thank you. For everything. For seeing something in me when I couldn't see it myself. His fingers intertwined with hers, warm despite the cold. Zara, I need to tell you something. These past few months, working with you, watching you rebuild yourself from nothing, you've changed my life too. Before she could respond, Chloe called from the ski lodge. Yuta coming in. It's getting cold out here. They walked toward the lodge together, hands still clasped, both sensing that something had shifted between them. Inside, over hot chocolate, Chloe showed them videos of Paralympic races, pointing out techniques and talking about the upcoming trials. You're not ready yet, she said honestly, but with your natural ability and the progress you've made, I think we could have you competitive within a year. A year, Zara repeated, tasting the timeline. It seemed both forever and impossibly soon. The question is, Chloe continued, what do you want? Not what you think you should want, or what you used to want, but what makes your heart race when you think about it. Zara was quiet for a long moment, watching the snow fall outside the lodge windows. I want to race again, not because I'm trying to get back what I lost, but because I think I might be better at this version of myself than I ever was before. Kai squeezed her hand. Then we'll make it happen. That night, as Kai drove her home through the snowy streets, Zara felt something she hadn't experienced in almost a year, excitement about the future. The Olympics she'd been training for were long past, but new goals were taking shape, goals that belonged to the person she was becoming rather than the person she used to be. Kai, she said as they pulled into her apartment complex, would you like to come up for coffee? He turned off the engine, meeting her eyes in the dim light. I'd like that very much. As they walked toward her building together, Zara realized that her life hadn't ended in that hospital room months ago. It had just taken an unexpected turn, leading her toward a future she never could have imagined, one that included not just new dreams, but someone to share them with. The unexpected challenge 8 months after that first day on the adaptive skis, Zara was flying down training slopes with a grace that amazed even Chloe. Her times were approaching competitive levels, and Paralympic scouts had started taking notice. But it was the relationship with Kai that had truly transformed her life. They'd been dating for months now, though Zara sometimes felt like they'd been together much longer. Kai understood her in ways no one else could. The frustration of her body's limitations, the fierce joy of breaking through barriers, the the complex relationship between loss and growth that defined her new life. This morning, however, something was different. Kai seemed distracted during their usual breakfast, at their favorite cafe, checking his phone repeatedly and avoiding her eyes. "You're being weird," Zara said, setting down her coffee cup. "What's going on?" "I got a call yesterday," he said finally, "from Walter Reed Medical Center. They want me to head up their new amputee rehabilitation program." The words hit her like a physical blow. Walter Reed was in Washington, D.C., nearly 3,000 miles away from their life in Colorado. That's incredible. "Kai, it's exactly the kind of opportunity you've dreamed about, is it?" His voice was uncertain. "Because right now I can't imagine leaving you." Zara's chest tightened. She'd been down this road before, torn between love and ambition, forced to choose between the life she wanted and the person she'd fallen for. Her ex-fiancé had given her that ultimatum years ago: choose him or choose skiing. She'd chosen skiing, and until her accident, she'd never regretted it. "You have to take it," she said, though the words felt like swallowing glass. "This is your career, your passion. I won't be the reason you don't reach your potential." "What if I don't want to reach it without you?" Before she could answer, her own phone buzzed. The caller ID made her heart race. "Paralympic Training Center. I need to take this," she said. Stepping outside the cafe, the conversation was brief, but life-changing. They wanted her to relocate to the Olympic Training Center in California for intensive coaching. The timeline: she needed to be there in 6 weeks if she wanted to make the next Paralympic team. When she returned to the table, Kai took one look at her face and knew. "Good news or bad news?" "Both," she said, sinking into her chair. "The Paralympic Committee wants me in California. Full-time training, world-class coaching, everything I've worked for since the accident." They sat in silence, the irony of the situation settling between them like a weight. After months of rebuilding their lives together, both of their dreams were pulling them in opposite directions. "When do you have to decide?" Kai asked. "Same as you. Probably soon." That evening, they walked through the park where they'd had their first official date, both lost in thought. The autumn leaves crunched under their feet, and Zara found herself thinking about cycles, how things died and were reborn, how endings led to new beginnings. "I keep thinking about what you told me that first day in the hospital," she said finally, "about beautiful transformations coming from broken places. What about it? Maybe this is another one of those moments. Maybe we're being broken apart, so we can become something even better." Kai stopped walking, turning to face her. "Or maybe we're about to make the biggest mistake of our lives." "I've been thinking about my ex-fiancé," she admitted. "How he wanted me to choose between him and my dreams. I thought I was being strong by choosing my dreams, but maybe I was just being afraid of letting someone else become that important to me. And now I'm terrified that I love you too much to ask you to sacrifice your dreams for mine, and too much to sacrifice mine for yours." Kai cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears she didn't realize had fallen. "What if we don't have to choose? What if there's a third option we haven't thought of yet?" "Like what?" "I don't know. But you've taught me that sometimes the best solutions come from the most impossible situations. We rebuilt you from scratch once. Maybe we can rebuild us too." That night, they lay awake talking until dawn, exploring possibilities, making lists, trying to find a path forward that didn't require one of them to give up everything they'd worked for. By morning, they had the outline of a plan, crazy, risky, and completely uncertain, but a plan nonetheless. "Are you sure about this?" Zara asked as they watched the sunrise through her bedroom window. "I'm not sure about anything, except that I love you," Kai replied, "and that we're stronger together than apart. Even if together looks different than we imagined, then let's do it," she said, her voice steady despite the fear and excitement warring in her chest. "Let's see if we can make the impossible work." As they began making phone calls that would change both their lives, Zara reflected on how far she'd come from that broken woman in the hospital bed. She'd learned to walk again, to ski again, to love again. Now she was about to learn the hardest lesson of all: how to hold on to love while chasing dreams, and how to trust that sometimes the biggest risks led to the most beautiful rewards. Asterisk New Horizons a year later. Zara stood at the top of the Paralympic downhill course in Pyeongchang, South Korea, her heart pounding with anticipation rather than fear. The journey to this moment had been nothing like she'd imagined, but every twist and turn had led her exactly where she needed to be. The impossible plan she and Kai had hatched that desperate morning had actually worked. He'd negotiated a consulting contract with Walter Reed that allowed him to split his time between DC and wherever Zara was training. She'd convinced the Paralympic Committee to let her work with both their coaches and Kai, arguing that his specialized knowledge of her specific case would give her an edge. It had meant sacrifice from both of them, more time apart than together, constant travel, relationship conducted through video calls and stolen weekends. But it had also made them stronger, more intentional about the time they did have together. "You ready for this?" Chloe's voice crackled through her earpiece. As her coach, Chloe had been with her every step of this journey, pushing her beyond what she thought possible. "I've been ready for this my whole life," Zara replied, adjusting her racing goggles. "Just took me a while to figure out what this actually was." She could see Kai in the crowd below, holding a sign that read "Fly, Zara. Fly," the same words he'd whispered to her during her darkest moments in rehabilitation. Next to him stood her parents, who had flown in from Colorado, and several of the other athletes from Kai's program who had become like family over the past year. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1. Zara launched herself down the mountain, and for the first time since her accident, she felt completely, perfectly herself. Not the skier she used to be, trying to recreate past glory, but the athlete she had become, stronger, wiser, more grateful for every turn, every breath, every moment of flight. The course was technical, demanding, exactly the kind of run that separated good skiers from great ones. Zara attacked it with everything she had, her prosthetic and outriggers working in perfect harmony, her body moving with a fluidity that came from months of training and years of refusing to give up. When she crossed the finish line and looked up at the scoreboard, she couldn't quite process what she was seeing. Not just a personal best, but a time that put her in medal contention, with only 2 skiers left to run. Kai was the first to reach her at the bottom of the hill, lifting her off her skis and spinning her round despite the protests of officials, trying to keep the finish area clear. "Did you see that?" She laughed, breathless with exhilaration. "Did you see how I took that final turn? I saw you fly," he said, setting her down but keeping his arms around her, "just like I knew you would." As the final 2 competitors completed their runs, both finishing behind Zara's time, the reality began to sink in. Paralympic bronze medal. 3 years after an accident that should have ended her skiing career, she was standing on a podium in South Korea with a medal around her neck. But as incredible as that moment was, it wasn't the one that mattered most. That came later, back at the athlete village, when Kai pulled her aside for a quiet walk despite the celebration happening in the common area. "I have something to ask you," he said, his voice unusually nervous. "If this is about the job offer in Switzerland, I already told you I think you should take it. We'll figure out the logistics, like we always do. It's not about Switzerland." He stopped walking, reaching into his jacket pocket. "It's about something more permanent." When he dropped to one knee, Zara's hands flew to her mouth. The ring was simple, elegant, and somehow perfect, much like their relationship, which had been built on friendship, respect, and the shared understanding of what it meant to rebuild yourself from broken pieces. "Zara Nightingale," he said, "you taught me that the most beautiful transformations come from the most broken places. You've shown me what courage looks like, what strength really means, and how to find joy in the midst of the impossible. Will you marry me?" Through her tears, she could see the bronze medal glinting in the evening light, could hear the distant sounds of celebration, could feel the weight of all the dreams that had died and been reborn to lead her to this moment. "Yes," she said, dropping to her knees to meet him at eye level. "Yes, to all of it. The marriage, the adventures, the whatever comes next, all of it." As they kissed there in the middle of the athlete village, Zara thought about the woman she'd been in that hospital bed, counting ceiling tiles and believing her life was over. That woman could never have imagined this moment, not just the medal or the proposal, but the deep, unshakable happiness that came from discovering that sometimes the most devastating endings were actually the most beautiful beginnings later. That night, as they video called her parents and celebrated with their teammates, Zara caught her reflection in the window. The face looking back at her was different from the one that had stared hopelessly at hospital ceilings 2 years ago. This face was marked by struggle. Yes, but also by triumph, by love, by the kind of hard-won joy that could only come from learning to build something beautiful from the broken pieces of what came before. Her leg was gone, her original dreams shattered, but everything that mattered most had grown from that devastation. And as she looked toward a future filled with new slopes to conquer, new challenges to face, and a love strong enough to weather whatever came next, Zara finally understood what Kai had meant about transformations. Sometimes you had to be completely broken before you could become completely whole.